proceed.
Sure. So thanks for allowing more time and to kind of wrap up the conversation from the PowerPoint that we discussed last week. Just to kind of quickly go back before we go back to the workforce stuff, just to kind of circle back on the military request for this year. So as you can see, out of the study, we're really going to be focusing in on these three core areas with the goals of community cooperation, workforce development, and infrastructure as it relates to our military installations. On the community cooperation side, again, this year we're really going to be focused on engagement. I think Neil had a really good point of trying to get the board of commissioners engaged in formal meetings with all senior leadership of all three installations, and so you can definitely help make those meetings happen when appropriate. I think that will help immerse senior leadership into the area. As Neil said, most of them are coming from outside the area. On the workforce development side, this really fits into a lot of what we're going to talk about as we get closer to the workforce development slides. The same kind of skill sets are needed both, and so we'll continue to support it that way. And then on the infrastructure side, we have a few studies underway. We did have our first joint land use study meeting in Hampton Township earlier this week, and so that will be about a year-long process looking at all transportation, stormwater related issues. And then also with the Exit 4849 study, we should have that wrapped up here in the next couple of weeks. So then on the workforce development side, as you recall, we had a very powerful video that we showed the last time. I think for anyone who has not been immersed in this, this video is really good at helping to illustrate and articulate the needs in the workforce, not only here in Cumberland County, but the region and probably throughout the country as well. So on the workforce development side, our initiatives really are to retain and recruit corporate and manufacturing companies here in Cumberland County. We all have a desire to not only retain the manufacturing and more skilled trade jobs that we have here, but also look to grow it as well. We think our location, our transportation network really does bode well for manufacturing related jobs. However, these are the jobs that are in most demand as far as labor. And so a big part of our focus is to work with the private sector and work with the workforce development agencies to be able to figure this all out, in addition to the educational community as well. These jobs are typically family-sustaining jobs, and so a big part of our strategic plan is to focus on recruitment and retention of jobs that are family-sustaining. So these are family-sustaining jobs, and so we want to make sure that that's at the forefront. Really rebrand the image and the perception of skilled jobs. As it alluded to in the video, there is this negative stigma about these kind of jobs, and so part of our efforts are going to be to try to use our marketing awareness and resources to a certain extent to change that image. And then most importantly is also educate the public on the demand and the opportunities that exist within these skilled jobs. Growth and demand, as we all know, Cumberland County is the fastest growing county. Baby boomers currently make up about 50% or more of the skilled jobs in the workforce. Automation is replacing humans, and they're looking for ways to increase productivity. You're seeing that really happen with businesses such as Amazon, which is right here in our backyard. They're going more towards innovation, which is reducing the workforce and cranking out more productivity. So we need to be ahead of that curve. That really plays into the advances in technology. And just the demands, here in the county and the region, healthcare is definitely number one. Manufacturing is up there at the top. Logistics and transportation, of course, with us being a hub. Construction, and also IT. We've seen a lot of IT demand. That seems very strong here in this region, and it's something that we want to continue to focus on as we move forward. Key occupational gaps, and you've seen some of this when Jesse McCree came in from the Workforce and Investment Board. We got a lot of this data comes from working with them. But you'll see in the healthcare that very high wages, at least on the practitioner side. On the construction side, you definitely see a pretty decent sustainable wage there. And then on the IT, mathematics side, computer side, pretty strong wage. So these are the four kind of main occupations that we see over the next 10, 15 years where there's a significant gap that we have to be able to fill as a community. We have a very low unemployment rate, so as we talk to businesses, the continued mantra is low unemployment rate, so a smaller pool, but then also an unskilled pool as well. So that's the challenge that we have as a community. Going into the future, 76% of the job openings do not require a bachelor's degree, a postgraduate degree. And so again, that goes back to the public awareness, is that there are good family-sustaining jobs to the tune of 76% moving forward, that you will not need a 4-year degree. And so again, it's really working with our K through 12 and just general public at large to really bring home that message.
Jonathan, don't mean to interrupt. I wish Dr. Whitlam was here. I should know this, but what is CB specifically trying to do to change this stigma and try to get kids back into the skilled labor force?
Sure. So I don't know the exact number of how many kids graduate and I'm going through a 4-year degree, but I know it's pretty high. And so he's trying to really do two things. He's trying to, whatever that percentage of kids who are not going on a 4-year degree, he's trying to find them, a home in the way of a job and or some type of 2-year degree or certification program.
I'm sorry, Jonathan, what organization is he affiliated with?
Cumberland Valley School District.
The superintendent.
He's a superintendent, yeah.
He's the top dog.
I spoke with him on the phone.
Yeah.
There you go.
Probably.
Nice guy.
But one of the other stats that he's brought up that's pretty alarming is, and you've seen it in the video as well, is that a lot of the kids who do go on 4-year college end up dropping out pretty quickly. And so in his mind, that's the problem, of course, in that maybe if we introduce some of those kids who are just going to college to go to college because their parents said they should probably go, maybe if we can show them another path, that they don't waste those dollars and go on to a 4-year school just to drop out a year or two later, go back home, have student loan debt, and that kind of thing. So his whole purpose is to really bridge that gap between the non-college bound students and students who do go on to 4-year degrees who don't end up making it. Can we put together, can we have partnerships with employers in the private sector to get these kids internships, apprenticeships while they're still here, get them all their credits by the end of their 10th grade year, so therefore their 11th and 12th grade years, instead of sitting in study hall or lunch periods, that they're out in the workforce gaining real experience. So that's really his overall goal. So our plan and our focus, again, healthcare is our #1 private employer. Pennsylvania ranks second behind Florida in having the most oldest elderly population. So we know that healthcare is going to be here for a while. There's a growing need of nurses to offset the wave of retirements. Also, a lot of the more senior nurses haven't readily embraced technology and everything. It's a polite way of saying it, but and technology is really changing the landscape of nursing. And so, there's a big gap there between technology and how to get folks up to speed. On the registered nursing side, so Laura's really been working with Holy Spirit and Geisinger and putting together a very robust registered nursing program, working with them to understand what are your needs, what are the skill gaps, and how do we then work with the K through 12 and the general population to get you a skilled workforce for moving forward. And what's really driving this is really two things here. Number one is, you'll see from 2014 to 2024, we're going to have a net gain of new nurses, registered nurses, of about 2,900. That number includes new demand, and that number also includes retirees. And so that's a big number that we're going to have to meet over the next few years.
So this is the demand, this isn't a projection of how many we're going to have, right? This is the projection of demand?
This is the projection of demand based on current and what they're projecting out in the future. And then the other thing is the wage. I mean, that's a pretty decent average wage of $68,000 a year when you need to fill a gap of about, close to 3,000 jobs over a 10-year span.
We just boosted ours at the Christmas.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're probably not too far off of where these numbers are. And so you're probably experiencing it there as well. So this is a real challenge for us. Geisinger and Pinnacle have been great partners. And we really have to move on this, quickly. As you can see that there's a significant demand there. On the advanced manufacturing side, the number's not as big. So you'll see there that, it's 490 is the gap that we have to bridge over this, over this 10-year period of time. Annual average wage is still a good, livable wage of about 48,000. A lot of the concern here is, the retention of the businesses. And so when you talk to folks like Ames, they have a strong presence here. They have facilities all throughout the country. They have facilities internationally as well. And I think that they're really right to bring a lot of jobs back here to the States. They really want to bring jobs back here to the States. But when you talk to them, their main concern is, again, it comes down to workforce. And so, we see this number as, it's 490. It's not as big as the nursing demand. But if you look at the total economics of manufacturers and what they do in the community from a tax-based perspective, what they do from a wage perspective, and all of the kind of offshoot businesses that usually come with manufacturing, this is a huge deal.
John, there's been a lot of publicity over the years about out-migration of manufacturing, particularly in the South. And of course, we've had some of that here as well.
Sure.
North Carolina, particularly being a target state that's been appealed. Have we seen any ebbing of that or reversal of that, or I haven't heard anything on that trend in a while? This goes to the retention question. Do we feel that we've seen the worst in terms of jobs being
Yeah, I think we have. I won't mention the business, but one of the businesses that did leave here and went down south, the reason they did so is because they got a better deal. They got better incentives down there. Labor costs were cheaper, no unions. But one of the things that they really quickly realized was that the quality of the workforce was actually better up here. They also saw that there's more households up here. So down south is a little bit more sparse. The work ethic is not as good as it is up here. There's some weather challenges depending on where you go down south. And so this is a pretty resilient area to a lot of manufacturers. Another thing is that we're close to major ports in cities. And so a lot of manufacturers, Ames using them as an example, they like this area not only from a work quality perspective, but also from a distribution perspective as well. And that they have, 4 major ports they can hit in a day, and you can hit, all the major cities up and down the East Coast within a day's drive. And so I think our location from a distribution perspective also plays well. So I think to answer your question, we've seen the worst, and I think that's why we really want to focus, because we think we can make some inroads to actually see some movement here happen. And actually, we'll be talking a little bit about that at the Cater board meeting in September. We had a good conversation about that in policy planning a few days ago. So our strategy, year one is really the programming side. So currently what we're doing on both the nursing side and the manufacturing side is we have ad hoc committees working. From the private sector, we have employers at the table. We have the educational folks at the table. And we're really working through curriculum, so making sure that the educational component side of it, that the curriculum meets the demand and the needs of the private sector and the employers. And so those employers have played an integral role up to this point, and will be over the next 12 months or so, of really working with those educational institutions on making sure that the curriculum is going to meet the future needs. Phase 2 that we see really going into the second half of next year is going to be the implementation stage and the recruitment stage. And again, that's going to be looking at, how are the educational institutions, whether it's Will Tech, whether it's Cumberland Valley, whether it's HAC, whether it's a 4-year college or university, how are they doing with recruiting students into those programs? And so we want to make sure that that's aligned well, again, with the end employers, and making sure that we have internships set up. And so we've been working through articulation agreements with the employers and the educational folks on internships and apprenticeships, which we think are really key to end employment at the end game. Phase 3, end of 18 going into 19, is really going to be an awareness and branding campaign. We don't quite know what that is yet, but we know it's something along the lines of just trying to get people thinking differently about some of these skilled jobs, and probably more importantly about the demand in the future for these jobs and some of the employment and economic opportunities that exist. And then at the end, we're hopefully able to benchmark. Do we have less than 150 nursing jobs open? Do we have less than 100 advanced manufacturing jobs open? So if we're seeing that the number of job openings are down or at a manageable number, I think for us that's a good sign that we're doing the right things. We're keeping the employers engaged and hopefully helping them with future recruitment. And then the last slide here just kind of shows some of our partners. On the private sector side, we have Tucky's and Cumberland Design and Build. United Way has been a good partner. Ames Shoe Temper, Lime Excavators, Geisinger, and Pinnacle Hospitals. And so for us, we wanted to really start small, make this a pilot program. So therefore, hopefully within a year or two, we're able to expand to include other school districts. We're also able to expand and include other businesses, and then hopefully also be able to include other industries as well, where we know that there's a lot of demand. And that could be construction, heavy equipment operator kind of jobs, and also IT, computer-related jobs as well. So we hope to be able to expand into those other industry sectors once we've really honed in on the program and we see that works for us here. And then just last is actually our funding request. And so for workforce development, our request is for $50,000. And year one measurables, again, we want to be able to come back to you in a year and say, here are the curriculums that we have with our educational partners that have been also approved by the private sector partners as well. And also that there's MOUs or articulation agreements in place between the employers and the schools on internships and apprenticeships, so that way we have a better way of being able to measure our outcomes. And then at least at an initial draft level that we have a strategy in place for how do we best brand and make the public aware of our efforts, and I think the need and demand that's going to be out there as we move forward. And then on the military retention recruitment side, we're asking for another $50,000 again this year. And this is really crucial work for us as we see it in kind of year two. We have a lot of infrastructure projects happening or studies happening. And one of the things that the guy who we met with that's doing the joint land use study with Hampton Township is, he said whether a BRAC is coming or not, he said every defense community needs to be prepared for a reduction in emissions or an increase in emissions, in the communities that are proactive, that look at what's happening outside the gate and how that helps what's happening inside the gate, are typically the ones that are successful. And so that's been our mantra, and we want to continue with the work that has been done. We're really following the plan that we had done from a year ago, and really implementing some of those key goals and objectives as we kind of move forward. So that kind of ends my presentation, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, a couple. First of all, I really appreciated that YouTube video that you showed the last time. And, from my perspective, that should be, required viewing for every school district guidance counselor, as well as for every probably 9th and 10th grader and their parents, okay? And that shouldn't cost anything to do that. Relative to your request here, I will just make this observation. We're in day 25 of the latest state budget impasse. Day 25 of an unbalanced state budget. We have accounting obligations that are required by the state. So I'm not quite sure at this point in time anyway, as to whether we have a good handle on available resources for, to meet the request. The other question I have, and I'll get back to something I think I've suggested and asked before, is, when you talk about accountability and, for the resources. In fact, I was at a Conservation District Board meeting last night with a couple members of the Conservation District Board said they should just cut spending, okay?
Except on their programs.
Yeah, and so it comes back to, this whole question of spending, okay? And it has to do with the mission of our school districts, the mission of our educational system, and why this is not being addressed, by our schools in cooperation with the business community, the way it is right now, without this, extra expenditure of county resources. So these are some of the questions I have. Just out of curiosity, when you list the partners here, have any of them contributed any funds?
They haven't contributed any funds. They've contributed time and resources of staff, but actual dollars, no. What I will say is that, for instance, PP&L does have a grant that they've encouraged us to, a workforce development grant that they've encouraged us to apply for. If we were awarded these funds, that we would use as our local match leverage to be able to utilize those funds. And so, I think that for us, I think Jim, to answer your question, we don't see this as a long-term kind of funding source, but we see it as a way to bring better awareness to the school districts to say, yes, this is part of your problem. Here's a good pilot program that we're launching with Cumberland Valley. So therefore, it kind of hopefully goes more on autopilot as time goes on. It just becomes part of their daily scope of work, and less of ours, I guess, is a better way of saying it.
Well, first of all, I will say, what you've put together here is very good. And it covers a lot of the things that I think need to be addressed. The question I have at this point is whether it's right for us to use taxpayer dollars from the county perspective, on this, because I'm not clear on exactly, we're doing this anyway right now. Okay. So, I would hope that would continue through Katie. And I would certainly be willing to be a part of that process. My only question is relative to the specific dollar requests and exactly, how they're going to be used, or how those dollars can be used. And I'd be interested to hear that. But the other thing I wanted to, just out of curiosity, what is the fund balance of CADIC right now?
When you say fund balance, do you mean?
What's the fund balance for CADIC?
Balance sheet wise, or
Yeah.
profit and loss, or?
It's about 1.3 million, but they're designated for tourism promotion,
All of that?
the majority.
I think the ED budget's probably like
ED
200,
is about 200.
200,000 is what the budget is.
So all of the 1.3 million that, if you will, is sitting in the bank is for tourist promotion.
Correct. A lot of it is not. The ED runs on a much smaller budget with very restricted funds on an annual basis and sitting in the bank account. And that's why, the funding is necessary. I mean, to your point, Jim, because we've seen cuts at the state level, we've seen cuts at the county level from when I started, when economic development probably used to get over $100,000 a year. Those cuts are realized, and so we've had to go out to the private sector and fundraise to be able to still, do our work. How much of this we could do without any funding source, we would have to make a leadership management decision and say, well, how do we pay for it? We would love to continue to do the work, but if it's not, we don't have a way to fund it, to do it properly, then, either we have to scale it back or, look for other people to step up to do more. And at this point, we think that we have really good traction, and so we want to continue to be proactive in this, and again, find a long-term solution that doesn't necessarily mean coming back and using county taxpayer dollars to be able to fund it.
Well, I think the leadership role that Katie is playing and the collaboration with all these parties is important, and I certainly would like to see that continue. So those are just some thoughts that have been going through my mind, considering that last weekend the legislature was looking at essentially rating from the 911 fund that helps to support our emergency services, public safety response. They were looking at taking money from the state's commitment to farmland preservation and the funds that we get, and we contribute the matching funds that we get. They still have not fully funded the reimbursement of our court system, even though we're required to offer all those things. So, we have certain mandates, that we're required to address. And then I read, where essentially some of the House are saying that, well, we should go back to the original House budget, which, essentially wiped out funding for a bunch of mandated state programs, including intermediate punishment, juvenile probation, and adult probation. So I'm just a little sensitive right now, personally, as to, our primary needs, and seeing where this whole budget, debacle lands. But I want to say this, I am fully supportive of everything that Katie has done here, especially to bring these various parties together. And that, I think I talked about it before, it was like, over 25 years ago when Governor Casey was saying the same thing, and the Casey administration was saying the same thing. I cannot, for the life of me, understand why our school districts, never, got the message. And, we're still graduating all these folks who are heading on 4-year degrees and potential debt for jobs that may not pay as well as they could with just a little bit of extra, training, this career certification and so forth. But I think the effort that all of you folks have put forward here is worth continuing, and actually doing what we can to support them. At this point, and I'll be happy to volunteer, my time to, help. But again, that YouTube video, that should be required viewing, I think, for every 9th and 10th grader and their parents, and all of our guidance counselors who are essentially encouraging kids to go to college, where they should be, they should be encouraging to consider other alternatives. So that wasn't so much of a question as
I'm looking at this word
a new statement.
I'll echo some of that, which is, you guys have obviously thought this through. These efforts don't just happen on their own, and you don't fix, 40 years or 50 years worth of failing schools with a single program, but these things do cost money. And if we want this to continue and we support it and we think it's worthwhile, then this is very in keeping with the entire public mission that EDC was charged with, and that warrants our support. So we've known about the precarious situation with the state's budget for quite a while, but it didn't stop us from authorizing all types of other new spending. So this is something that has a real result. This is the kind of work we formed your organization to perform. So I'd be supportive of it. I think the dollar amount is reasonable, especially on the workforce development side. And there are certain realities we're going to have to deal with, both in terms of military bases and force some employers, just because we've seen a waning perhaps of other states draining our biggest current manufacturers that don't have serious challenges ahead. Our state government continues to put more obstacles in the path of startups, and what we need to be concerned about is not just a handful of large manufacturing companies, it's about having a climate here that allows small businesses to form and succeed, and when they do close, that there'll be a new generation of startups as well. Businesses that grow from small companies into bigger companies are a good thing for us too. So there's a long chain of steps that are involved in a healthy economy, and you can't make a decision based on just where you're standing today. You have to look where you're going, and I think workforce is clearly an issue that's been neglected on for a long time. And this would be a very good start for us to ensure that Pennsylvania, especially South Central Pennsylvania, remains competitive, a very competitive environment. That's all I have.
Jonathan, you mentioned here there's 5 key sectors: healthcare, advanced manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. The pilot's going to kind of concentrate on 2 of those.
Correct.
And your partner list, how do you get on that list?
Well, what we did was, we did a lot of studying on other communities and what they've done well and how to learn from a lot of those communities. And one of the biggest red flags or don't do's that we saw was don't go too big, to start small. So everyone who's on the list, we had a really solid relationship with prior to. So we kind of started dating with the folks that we knew, and we knew had a vested interest in seeing this happen. With the thought process, to Gary's point, that if we're able to help Ames achieve their goals, it also helps the small businesses that do manufacture some small widget achieve their goals as well. And so, we thought by being selective in who we started with, A, we had relationships with, but B, we knew they were vested in seeing this happen. But if there's anyone else who you think we should be in communication with or contact with, we definitely don't want to ignore them or their needs. But that's just to give you a taste of how we got the list.
I guess the folks I was thinking about would be at a future period of time, and maybe at the construction site.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Pensy Supply,
Yeah.
Brothers Quarries. I know in Silver Spring, both of those organizations are very well respected.
Yeah.
And had a conversation with Maxim yesterday, the day before yesterday. We got to talking about the same topic. He was mentioned, some of my high-end heavy equipment operators faces very good.
Yeah.
And they had trouble finding them.
Yeah.
Anyway, for the
Yeah.
future, maybe the future.
Pensy Supplies, did you mention them? They actually, I think I mentioned this last week, but the folks from Pensy and the school district and Hack and Laura, they went down to Volvo.
Mhm.
Volvo has a new visitor center where they do a lot of showcasing of new equipment that they're bringing online for the next given year. And so they were down talking about how can they take some of those simulators and maybe use those and get them into some of the school systems, and would they be willing to potentially donate some of that equipment and give Volvo some brand recognition. And Pensy was part of that trip. And so Pensy, is a contributor into our organization. We have a great relationship with them, and they've been at the table on numerous occasions as we think heavy equipment operators, kind of that third kind of area that we really want to tackle, because there's a need there on the construction side, but on the excavator side and others that do kind of Pensy type work.
Yeah, it was great to see the line on here.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, with the $50,000, that would go towards the 3 items you mentioned. creating awareness?
A lot of it, I mean, the way we position this is because this has become a very important issue for us. When we originally had hired for Laura's position, it was really based on financing, business financing. And, you know, you go back 3 or 4 years ago, banking restrictions were still very tight. A lot of small businesses, you know, weren't able to get the funding that they needed from the banks. That has started to shift a little bit to where you're seeing banks starting to loosen up a little bit more. So while our financing demand is still strong, it's not as strong as it was 3 or 4 years ago. And this has become more and more of a focus for us, kind of replacing that shift in workload. And so a lot of the 50,000 is going towards Katie being able to deploy our staff resources to focus on this and make it a priority, continue to make it an ongoing priority for us. And so, you know, the measurables that we would plan to come back to you with in a year would be is that, you know, we have these curriculums in place with these employers, with these internships, these apprenticeships programs, these, you know, basically it's the molding of the relationships, and the outcomes are really going to be is getting, you know, 11th and 12th graders. That's really our focus at the moment in the internships and apprenticeships that then hopefully, you know, lead into future full-time employment. And then the end result, of course, you know, is, you know, keeping the businesses that are here and looking at opportunities to, you know, one of the things we talked about, and Gary, you brought it up a couple months ago at the Cape board meeting is, you know, why haven't we focused more on manufacturing? There's 2 main issues that we have. We have a workforce issue and we have a site issue. We don't have a lot of sites that you can put a manufacturing facility at because you need water, you need sewer, you need certain on-site transportation, and we just don't have any sites for it. And we just got 2 requests today, and Mary and I were like, we don't have any sites. And then even if you're able to land them on the site, the next question is, you know, they're going to ask us, where's the workforce coming from? You know, where are we able to, you know, and then they'll say, well, give me 3 or 4 references to 3 or 4 manufacturers that we can talk to. They'll call them up and they'll say, we're struggling. We have, you know, 50 job openings we need to fill now. So that's why we haven't been able to really recruit any new manufacturers to the area. So we're hoping that through this program that we're able to tell employers that are looking in, here's our process as it relates to manufacturing. Here are the schools that we have MOUs with and internships and apprenticeships with. So if you need to bring in 60 employees or 100 employees, we have a process, we have a program that can meet your workforce development needs. And that's what we hope to have in a year from now that we currently do not have today.
Why did you pick CV?
Leadership, to be honest with you. You know, Fred's been totally engaged, he gets it. And that's not to say none of the other superintendents don't.
Yeah.
But he gets it in a very progressive, proactive way.
I'm glad you picked CV. That was the point of my question, because if CV does this, they will follow.
They will follow. And that's another issue, and that's why we have some of the employers that we pick too, because we figured they were notable enough to where if this is successful, they will follow as well and say, okay, well, Ames is doing it, well, Tuckey's is doing it, Pinnacle is doing it. Okay, this must be something that we need to get in line with if we want to see our workforce grow as well.
Okay, Jonathan, without the $50, if we say no way, what happens?
Internally, we would have to reposition and say, well, how do we fund it? And if there's not a way, then we have to scale back. And I don't know what that scale back would mean. Maybe that means we would have to go to Fred and say, you need to take this on, because we need to do other things to keep the lights on and to keep things going on our end. But that's what we hope to have to avoid, and hopefully we can continue to avoid.
The school districts, in my opinion, waste so much money on non-academic stuff. I'm sure they could find 50,000. But, and Jim makes some good points too about, you know, the state keeps us on pins and needles, it seems, every year. They're trying to do it, we can't figure it out. And that's a legitimate concern, but we can't, at least speaking for myself, can't wait for them to make up their damn minds. And market out there, the lack of skilled labor, this enigma where these kids go to school, college, and 3 out of 4 of them drop out. I'm leaning towards supporting this request. There's just, I'm looking at the positives and certainly looking at the negatives. I'm leaning towards the yay.
John, one of the things that might be helpful would be to see sort of the overall, to some extent you've given it to us in the past, but the overall story arc. Like, what does year 2 look like? What does year 3 look like? Where is this
Sure.
going? So,
It's in here a little bit right here. So if you go back to this slide,
Right.
again, year 1, we're really focused on curriculum. And we're really, focused on making sure that we have articulation agreements between the employers and the education and community. So that's really kind of year 1. We need to make sure that we have that down pat.
I guess what I'm getting at really is, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but as an elected official, the question I have looking at that is, okay, now I know the price tag for year 1. Do I have any idea what the price tag for years 2 and 3 are before I start down this path?
Sure. I get that. I don't see it going any higher for sure.
On an annual basis.
On an annual basis.
All right.
I think the majority of your costs and legwork are always in year 1 and 2 of just trying to ramp up.
Yeah.
I think you guys nailed it in that, this has been something that's been avoided for the last 40 or 50 years. So can I come and say, hey, I won't be sitting here again in a year asking you for some more financial support? I think I would be misleading you by telling you that. But I think what we're trying to get to is a point to where this is self-sustaining, that this is not something to where 5 years from now, we're still saying that we're still trying to get across.
How do we get to self-sustaining? What's the vision on that?
I think-
Because all I've heard so far is this is, in all honesty, that this is going to be an annual, request of at least $50,000.
Sure.
Fund.
Well, essentially, then that was my next question. So essentially, you're proposing a 3-year plan, 3-year program.
I'm thinking that this is at least a 3-year program. And what to me was self-sustaining is that if we have articulation agreements, and that's why these articulation agreements are important to us, is that starts to set the foundation between the relationship between whatever educational institution that is and that employer directly. So now that they have direct links, we're becoming less of that in between, and they're working more closely together. And I think a good success story to that is we're starting to see that between CV and Ames. Their staffs are now talking a lot more directly and a lot less with us involved. And I think our step away from this is that as that is happening, that we're making those direct connections between staff, the guidance counselors, or whoever the school district, puts in place to kind of run with it within the school system, and whatever HR professional or whoever's handling that from the private sector perspective as well. And as those relationships are forming, that means that that's less that we have to be engaged and involved. And so our piece in this is really to set the foundation, to really have a very strong message, once we have a couple success stories. And then we're hoping that to be able to back away from this and allow those parties to build a relationship from there. So we see this as a 2 to 3 year kind of funding request, and then hopefully we'll be able to, allow those parties to address it on their own from there.
So the newest guy here in town, well, I'm here in the county, has never developed or supported a workforce development.
To my knowledge, no. The state at one point had a BREC program, which was the retention and expansion program, which we used to get about $100,000 to $150,000 a year. That program wasn't specifically workforce; it was more retention, but it had a strong focus on workforce. That funding went away. At least I've been here 5 years, so it's been 5, 6, 7, 8 years now since it's been gone. And when that really left, that's when I think, at least from the EDC perspective, there was a real shift to where folks really didn't focus so much on business retention and workforce development. It became more transactional, meaning EDCs to survive had to do transactions to be able to support their budget. And so they became more transactional and less focused on public mission work. And for us, we need to strike a balance, I think, in this county to where, yes, to some extent, Katie needs to be transactional, but we also need to be public policy driven. And if there's no dollars to support it, then we can't do it. And I think in the long run, that doesn't do well for our community.
Jonathan, you may not know this, does Cumberland Valley, their budget, which their budget is bigger than ours overall, are they specifically putting dollars towards this?
Yeah, they are putting resources towards this in the way of staff, in the way of future planning of facilities. They've thought of, as you all know, they're repositioning some of their school buildings. Some of their school buildings are coming offline, and so I know they've had some conversations. They've had some conversations with us as to could they repurpose some of those buildings for some of these uses. So I think to a certain extent, another reason why we went to them is because I think that over time they will be willing to put some resources, more financial resources into this, into this process.
If I could add to that, Cumberland Valley has committed to hiring an executive director type of position that would be working with us to help lead this effort. I mean, in addition to Dr. Whittam and his curriculum folks, hiring a specialty position that would be that key link to the job sector. So that as they're developing curriculum and they're re-engineering curriculum, biology is not just biology, but biology then leads to these pathway of jobs that are out there in the market, pre-college, post-college, that there's that connection with the employer sector.
So they're hiring a separate person?
Yes, and so, having sat in on some of these planning meetings, that to me is a huge commitment because, school districts do what school districts do. It's about the health and safety of those kids while they're in your facility, and hopefully they're learning while they're there and pass their tests. This new position, I think, will really change the paradigm of the 1960s educational model, where there is more of a focus in curriculum development leading to jobs, to the private sector.
I mean, we pay, at every one of our school districts, a lot of them have their directors of curriculum.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
They're already paying for all this stuff. That's one of my questions.
But those directors of curriculum are curriculuming to meet state Department of Education requirements.
Yeah.
They're not curriculuming the student base to position them for jobs.
Well, I
Just-
see
they're just not.
that speaks to a
So
disconnect.
it's a really change of paradigm, and having sat in some of these workforce meetings with people like Dr. Whittam, you hear the challenges. They recognize the problem, but they can't get out of their own way because they are what they are. And I do think that by bringing in a position that's dedicated to this to work with us, we'll have a chance of making improvements. And I would also say that if KDIC were not involved at this level, these conversations would not be happening in the results that we're seeing when they're forming partnerships and relationships and providing kids with jobs, like with the Ames example, would not be happening.
Right, so the conversation that Kate and you're involved in so far and what you're doing so far, okay? Why can't that continue?
Because we have the reality of everyone else in this budget. For us to take a position and say 60 to 70% of your time is spent on something that, financially doesn't cover itself, it's a tough proposition. So that means we then have to spend more resources.
Well, I haven't seen the, you can show me numbers and that, but I kind of I'd be interested in terms of those resources as to what is suffering now.
Yeah.
And, what would suffer in the future, or what you mentioned something before about the business tax credits or the business credits or whatever that Laura's not involved with as much.
The financing.
Business financing.
Business financing, yeah.
Business financing. And So up to this point, it's worked, and that's kind of like what I'm getting at is to, and then I know Larry had a question that he wants to ask, but the other question I had is, in terms of this, if you will, public-private partnership, and the request, it would seem to me that a number of these entities that are listed as partners, and some of them may be committed, manpower resources. But it would seem to me that maybe, because it also is in their best interests, to see this succeed, that maybe they would be willing to, shell out a few dollars to support King's effort.
Yeah. To your point, Jim, is that right now I have Laura, who's one person doing 3 jobs. She fundraises, she does loans, she does workforce development. If I want to keep a talented employee like that, I can't keep a talented employee like that doing 3 things just to make a budget work. And so where these dollars come into play is that allows me to relieve a talented individual to focus on a priority because it's a priority for the county, not a priority for Katie's budget. And so it's worked up to this point, but it won't work. It's not sustainable, I guess is the proper way of saying it. So we need to find a sustainable short-term solution and think about the long-term solution to that as well.
Does this mean you're going to add staff at Katie?
It doesn't mean that we're going to add staff as much, but that may mean that I don't need her to go out and raise fundraising dollars. If I have a person and I say, well, we can't get money from the county to support these efforts, then I got to say, well, now you got to divvy up more of your time and go raise money to support these efforts. And so that's less time that she's spending on. I think that's something that would have more return to the county, which is this program, versus having her do more fundraising.
And that's the alliance, right?
Yes, that's the
alliance is formed specifically because the county is backing away from its role in supporting public mission through KDIC.
So we're all
the
setting-
alliance, so and this was all discussed at the time too, so you're taking time away from actually doing public mission to try to keep the lights on.
and fundraising.
So
So she's a big part of that. Second thing is that if you look at a lot of the private sector partners, so Tucky's, Ames, Limes, Geisinger, Holy Spirit, they all contribute thousands of dollars to our organization a year. And so we do ask them for skin in the game. And they've all stepped up to the plate and give $5,000+ on an annual basis.
So these are alliance.
They all give money to us through fundraising efforts to help support a program like workforce development.
Do you get something from the United Way?
No, they're another nonprofit, but they're a good resource when we need them. No, they're probably the only one on here that doesn't contribute.
We got another meeting.
I know, Larry, yes.
Larry, don't want to forget your comments, questions.
2 quick technical questions, clarifications. Your proposal is, you have 2 proposals, one for 50,000 for this and 50,000 for the military stuff. Okay, and second, I think you partially answered, but I'll take it one step further. So what you're asking for the 50,000 here is to pay for existing staff. You're not adding staff, you're not adding a dedicated resource. You're basically using this to defray the cost of someone's salary. So the question that anybody would ask is, what guarantee do we have to what percentage of that person's time to work on this specific thing?
Sure.
So how does one know that this existing staff person might be pulled in another direction at the expense of this work?
Sure. So for Laura on the workforce development side, I think our plan was about 60 to 70% of her time with county funding we would like to allocate for this initiative. If we were not to get that would probably swing towards any majority of your time to go towards fundraising, and whatever we can do in workforce, we would try to do it. On the military side, that is a combination of myself and Shelby. Shelby probably spends, I would say, probably about 30% of her time on military, and myself, I'm probably 10, 15, 20% of my time as well. And so these requests do not come with us looking to hire, because then you're starting to bring on positions tied to a funding request, which is a very dangerous proposition to be in. If funding goes away, you have to probably let that person go. And we don't want to be in a position where we're making hiring decisions based on, state or county contributions towards our organization. And, this is really built into our strategic plan over the next year. And so, bearing any earth-shattering event, this is our mantra for the next few years, is to really get our arms around workforce development and making sure we have a very strong military plan that will continue to be executed and implemented.
Okay, well, we are coming up on the conclusion of our 2017 budget year, okay? And, I don't know how my colleagues view this, but, perhaps maybe this should be considered in the totality of the 2018 county budget, as opposed to in the middle of the year here.
We always come in around this time of the year. For us, budgetary wise, we put this in, a placeholder in for our 2017 budget. And, the same issues you have at the state level are the same issues we have at the state level. As far as funding for military, as far as funding for economic development programs. I would ask that this be considered in this fiscal year, as this is good work that needs to continue, and I think needs to continue pretty quickly.
Your budget year is calendar.
We're calendar, correct, yes. We'd have loved to come to you earlier in the year, but our problem was when we wanted to make sure that we thought through our request and what we were actually need to move forward.
Plus, it wasn't your fault you didn't present last week.
Okay. Jonathan will take this all under consideration and come up with a decision one way or the other.
Sure.
Very soon.
I was going to ask that, did you have any in mind as far as a time frame, just in case I'm asked by any leadership within Kate's board, or I'm not holding you to a date, but just a time frame.
I would say within a month. You always feel comfortable with that.
But we should be able to give a decision, one way or the other. Now,
Yeah.
in terms of, that's which year budget that goes into. I don't know if that changes the nature of your proposal at all. I mean, your first part of the workforce proposal probably 16 months ago, and we did nothing with it, so you didn't receive any money from it. You can't in 16, and so far you received no money for 17 on it. We should probably look at, I guess I have to ask Dana if what this does to us in 17, whether there's anything in the 17 budget to allow for this, or if this presents a problem for us. So we certainly want to weigh the budget impact, but we have a couple of questions to ask in terms of timing. But in terms of whether the commissioners want to commit to this or not, I would think the answer would be forthcoming pretty promptly.
Does anybody remember how much in money we gave for the last military stuff? Is that
Last year, this
is
time.
that last year?
We come in every
So you did get military money last year?
Yeah.
From us? Okay.
military, not workforce, but
Not
military.
Yeah, that's 50,000 for the
Yeah.
military. That I believe.
We usually come in June, July timeframe every year.
Right.
And usually if the county does support what you have every year, it's usually been August, September timeframe. Usually when we would typically get a check or anything.
And you're still drawing the Commonwealth money, that hasn't been caught in any,
That has been caught up.
that has been caught.
We're at a stalemate on
Right.
where we're at at the state level.
Right.
Yeah.
What they committed is not coming.
Correct, until they figure out the budget, impact. So, we're in the same predicament, just a host of other issues of not knowing where we stay on step.
Where did it go in the spending plan that was approved? Is that money up, down, out?
Down. It was down 30%.
Down
So it went from close to 800,000 down to $550,000. So now out of that 550, the state DCEP is contemplating how to allocate those funds. And so the funds they committed to $210,000. They're, whatever we had to draw down is pretty much a freeze until they figure it all out.
Yeah, one of the comments, just so you know, that came back from the legislature with respect to the counties and our ask for, the restoration of funds that they were going to eliminate for alternative sentencing, for juvenile probation, adult probation, and some of the other areas was, well, maybe we should just make sure that the counties get rid of some of their pet projects, as part of this process, as opposed to, funding the state's obligations. So I just want to say that I think the work that Katie is doing is excellent. I think he's doing a great job. And, but some of the questions I'm asking, are questions that, like I said, I picked up, from a couple of conservation board members last night. They should just cut spending, okay? And like Larry said, cut spending for somebody else, not for me. But in any event, I think you're doing great work, and I will certainly, continue to, consider the request here. So,
We got to end up here. Jonathan will have a decision one way or another with that one.
Okay, that's good.
Any other comments, business to be brought in front of the finance committee? Hearing none, is there a motion for adjournment? For adjournment, thank you.